Am I the a-hole for pointing out my aunt has a favorite kid at a family dinner? My Aunt Mara, 45 female, has 2 kids. Reese, 13 female, and Laura, 9 female. Mara has always clearly preferred Laura. Reese always knew it too. My aunt always makes sure Laura can do the extracurricular she wants to do. She lets her drop out at any time. Even if she's paid in advance, she gives her the birthday she wants every year, and in general she's more affectionate and interested in what Laura is up to. With Reese, she pushed her into dance when she was for 4 years. Reese never liked dance and never seemed to fit in. Mara hated it. That she had always wanted a daughter who did dance. I, 18 female, was around there a lot because Aunt Mara babysits me for my parents while they worked, and then I just had to wait at her house until my parents got home so we could save on electric bills and stuff. I once asked Aunt Mara why Reese couldn't do something she wanted to do, and she told me they didn't have the money for it. Reese never got to do another one, but Laura has several. Soccer, dance, art and swim right now. But she's also done basketball, photography, gymnastics, which really upset Reese because she always wanted to do gymnastics, guitar, piano, drums and singing. Aunt Mara also discards Reese's plans and has made her cancel to look after her sister, but also made Reese skip her plans when Laura has them and they conflict. In the last year and a half, Reese has just decided to say FCK everyone. She's definitely weighed down by it all. We talk about it because she said I'm the only one who acknowledges it. But I have definitely noticed. We were all gathered for a family dinner Sunday. It was my grandparents' birthday this week, so the family decided to celebrate Sunday, and Reese was in a really bad mood. Aunt Mara told her she was bringing down the mood, and Reese got up and left the table. Aunt Mara said she didn't know what was up with her, but she's always acting like the whole world is out to get her. I mentioned that maybe, if she didn't show such blatant favoritism, Reese would be happier. My aunt and parents were pissed I would bring it up. My grandparents asked what I meant. Aunt Mara said I didn't know what I was talking about, and Reese is such a drama queen. I told my grandparents what I meant, and they were shocked. Aunt Mara said Reese never wanted to do anything. Grandma remembered how often Reese would ask to do gymnastics. My parents told me it wasn't the correct time or place to bring it up, and I embarrassed Aunt Mara. Am I the a-hole? Op's parents were very poor according to her description. She hung out at Aunt's house in order to save electricity at her own home. So it's unlikely they had any other childcare options. Common sense says you don't put someone on blast when you desperately need their help. Welcome to the world of the working poor. Sometimes you have to eat shit to put food on the table. The problem here is Aunt. Good for Op for sticking up for cousin, but she has nothing to lose here, so it's not a reflection on the character of her own parents that they never said anything. They may not even have known, given that they seem to work a lot. They owe the aunt a lot for providing years of free childcare and are not going to attack her, deserved or not. That doesn't mean they were poor, though it's definitely the most likely answer. There are some kids, like me, who grew up with extreme penny-pinching parents, even though we were nowhere near poor and lived middle class. Timing showers because of the cost, losing your mind over a light left on for 2 minutes extra, demanding you pay for it from your super meager allowance, which you only earn through hard, not kid-friendly labor. There are people who would happily dump a kid on someone just to save on electricity and food for part of the day. Some people should never have kids. Especially people who don't like to waste money on things like new shoes for a kid when you can just duct tape them, or requiring clothes be bought at the second-hand store, which is fine for kids, and smart. Except when you require they only buy from the clearance rack of the second-hand store, meaning nothing fits, and you're lucky it's not stained somewhere or torn or 80s paisley print. Or all three. And this isn't the decent second-hand store. Nope, it's the really crappy second-hand store to begin with, that seemingly takes the cast-offs from the first store. When I was 12, my mom just had enough of this nonsense, I guess. She took me to get new clothes. From an actual store in the mall. And not even the clearance section? It was incredible for me and my self-esteem. I was her homeschooled, low-old ruggy parents trying to teach. I just read books, they at least encouraged that, so I wasn't picked on for my clothes, but I had started My parents were always really tight-lipped about how much they made. I understand where they came from, though. My grandparents, on both sides, weren't very financially successful and had huge families. It was hard for both of my parents growing up. So they tend to be money hoarders and feel insecure about finances. The biggest thing my parents wanted to avoid was becoming a burden on their children. My grandmothers right now are heavily dependent on my parents, and it's exhausting for them. They raised their kids and were ready to enjoy retirement. But now they're spending their retirement taking care of their mothers. But other than being financially weird, they were awesome parents and paid for me to be on top-tier soccer teams growing up, and generally tried to give me the best head start they could. My mom kept a running total of what I owed her. It was mostly vehicle-related expenses for a car of theirs I killed. She would just randomly add in amounts and browbeat me until I agreed I owed that amount. I never had any intention of paying it. Every birthday or Christmas she would rob a couple of $100 off of it. I still got a goodly amount of presents, so that wasn't a big deal. Finally, when I was around 30, she came around and told me she was dropping the whole amount, since my history with cars I own pretty much proved I wasn't killing cars due to any neglect or mistreatment. What is it with ads and spreadsheets? Mine did this too. I worked and gave all my money to them, but he pulled up a spreadsheet to show me I was the biggest percentage of the family budget. It was devastating and stressful and so unnecessary, as my family was basic middle class with no debt. The reason I cost so much, BTW? Because they talked me into going to an expensive religious private school. My expenses were all things like class trips and school fees. I also grew up very similarly. We were definitely middle class and lived in a nice home in a nice neighborhood, but from very early on my parents were strict about money and always made it seem like we were poor, even though kids at school would always comment about us being well off. Even though there was so much I could relate to with the kids from poorer families. Once I got older, I ended up figuring out that we really weren't that poor. My parents just rather spend their money on themselves than on their children. I was also trying to do the math and figure out how to say that mom's request to not come home is likely not a true financial one, or at least not isolated to electric. I'm conflicted because not everyone has the tools and skills to find out how much they'll actually save with their actions, and I'm pretty sure my family members would try something like that if they weren't already connected with utility assistance. I feel like OP would have said more, and perhaps I didn't see it, if finances were the case, and if their parents were relying on Mara. I'd expect something more written about it, like now mom is mad because we were saving so hard, and I may have cost her a babysitter for my sibling. What I'm definitely familiar with is being criticized for following updated info that contradicts the way things are done, including conflicts about lighting and energy use. Impacted by bulb type, and therefore by what bulbs they're selling at the dollar store, and finding out later how, like yours, some families' financial worries are more about parents' behavior than the cost of raising children. Her parents and Aunt Mara can all go suck a big one. I am in a similar situation, where my grandma from my dad's side much prefers my aunt and her kids over my father and myself, even though my father bends his back to take care of them, while my aunt is well known to be super selfish. My grandpa acknowledges the fact that my grandmother doesn't treat me the same as she does my cousins, so he tries his best to interact with me more, but the fact is that he spent more time with my cousins than he did with me, so it's hard to relate to my interests, because he doesn't know them. They lived with my aunt in the States for a long time, and the first time I remember seeing them in person was when I was 16. I remember telling my dad that I've noticed that my grandmother acts significantly differently around my cousins than they do with me, and that she doesn't seem to care that he spends so much time taking care of them, while my aunt does nothing. And that was the first time I've ever seen my dad almost cry, because he thought only my mom noticed that. Needless to say, I'm very apathetic with my grandmother, and even more so now, because she realized that my cousins are super spoiled and don't want to talk to her unless it's for gifts and money. I still talk to her, because I know if I don't, my dad gets the short end of the stick, and I feel that he's already suffered enough, and I'm pretty sure he's well past his limit, but somehow still hanging on. But yeah, she knows I don't share as much with her as I do with my maternal grandparents. Seeing how my dad had to suffer makes me really feel for your older cousin.